My mom spent 4 months planning to steal my inheritance on my 18th birthday. She had no idea I'd already moved every dollar into a trust at midnight. She found out over birthday pancakes. My mother smiled when she slid the folder across the breakfast table. 3 pancakes, birthday candles, still smoking, one of them listing sideways in the butter. A manila folder with my full legal name typed on the tab. Quinn Ellery Marsh. She'd used my middle name. She only used my middle name when she wanted something to feel official. "Honey," she said, "we need to talk about that money." My blood ran cold. Then I remembered what I'd done at 12:01 a.m. I reached for the folder. My grandfather's name was William Marsh. He was a retired civil engineer who had spent 40 years designing bridges and overpasses across the mid-Atlantic states and who had invested his salary quietly and consistently for all of those 40 years in index funds and blue-chip shares and 2 parcels of land in central Pennsylvania that he'd bought in 1979 for almost nothing and sold in 2019 for considerably more than that. He was not rich the way people think of rich. He drove a Honda CR-V. He clipped coupons, real ones, from the Sunday paper, and kept them organized by expiration date in a small accordion folder in the kitchen drawer. He wore the same barn jacket for 15 years and saw no reason to replace it until the zipper gave out, and then he had it repaired rather than replaced. But he had done the math for 60 years, and the math had compounded, and when he died 18 months before my 18th birthday, the trust he left in my name held $681,412.90. Index funds, blue chip shares, cash from the land sale, all of it locked behind a single condition. I couldn't touch it until I turned 18. He died knowing he wouldn't be there when I did. Before he died, he gave me a cedar box. Inside it were 3 things: a pressed maple leaf from the tree in his backyard, a photograph of the 2 of us at the Delaware Water Gap when I was 9, and a sealed envelope. On the front, in his handwriting, "Open only if something feels off with your mother before your 18th birthday. Call David Caldwell immediately." I put the box in the back of my closet under a stack of old yearbooks. For 12 months, I didn't open it. My mother, Carol Marsh, is a woman who has always operated on the understanding that the world owes her a specific life, and that the people around her are the most efficient available mechanism for delivering it. She's not evil. I want to be precise about that, because precision matters in this story. She's not a villain in the movie sense. She's a woman of 43 who never quite got the version of things she felt she'd been promised, and who has spent 20 years finding creative ways to close the gap. She met Mark Hollis when I was 14. Mark was a real estate developer in the medium successful range, not wealthy, but comfortable in the way that projects confidence to people who don't look too closely. He had a daughter from his first marriage, Skylar, 2 years older than me, who was by 16 already certain she was going to Bucknell University, which is a fine school that costs approximately $65,000 a year. They moved in together when I was 15. He proposed when I was 16. They were engaged, not yet married, which is a legal distinction that would later become relevant. The man in the gray suit started showing up 6 months before my birthday, Wednesdays, 4:30 p.m. A charcoal Lexus ES350. I know the model because I looked it up. That parked at the curb rather than the driveway, which I noted without knowing why I noted it. He carried a leather binder with a brass closure, and he was gone in exactly 75 minutes, which I know because the first time he came, I was doing homework in my room, and I watched the car arrive and watched it leave and thought, that's oddly precise. My mother told me he was the insurance guy. Then, the following Wednesday, a financial planner. The week after that, a friend of Mark's. The story changed. The binder didn't. The afternoon I came home early is the afternoon the story actually starts, even though I didn't fully understand it until later. It was a Tuesday in November, a half day at school, teacher professional development, which meant I was home by 12:45 instead of 3:15. I came in through the mudroom, the way I always did, and I heard my mother's voice through the closed kitchen door. Not the words at first, just the cadence of it. The specific, low, controlled register she used when she was in the middle of something she considered important. I stopped. "Once she signs, the rest is just paperwork." Mark's voice. "And if she hesitates?" My mother, a dry half laugh. "Quinn, she'll sign. She always does." I stood in the mudroom for approximately 4 seconds. Then I opened the door, loudly, deliberately, and called out that I was home. I heard the specific sound of papers being gathered quickly. That particular rustling. I walked into the kitchen. The table was clear. My mother was standing at the counter, smiling, coffee mug in hand. "Snow day, huh? Want some cocoa?" "Half day," I said. Even better. She was standing with her hips slightly angled toward the counter, which was slightly unusual, which meant she was managing her body language, which meant she'd had a second to compose it. Under her purse, pushed to the corner of the counter, the edge of a folder, cream-colored. Letterhead I could only partially read. Briggs and Assoc. "Cocoa sounds good," I said. I went upstairs. I sat on my bed for a long time. She'll sign. She always does. I had been Quinn the easy one, Quinn the quiet one, Quinn who doesn't make things difficult. I had been performing that role my whole life, not because I was actually passive, but because I had learned early that the path of least friction kept the household functional, and that functionality was worth something. I understood, sitting on my bed that Tuesday, that someone had been studying my performance and drawing conclusions about my character from it. They had concluded that I was manageable. They were about to find out what I'd actually been doing with the quiet. I opened Grandpa's envelope on a park bench 2 days later. Not at home, not in my room. On the bench by the duck pond in Riverside Park, heart because I didn't know what the envelope contained and I wanted to be somewhere I could think without walls. The maple leaf was still inside the cedar box, and the photograph, and the envelope. I held the envelope for a moment, his handwriting on the front, the precise, slanted print of a man who drafted technical specifications for a living. I opened it. Peanut, if you're reading this, your instincts are right. Trust them. David Caldwell has been my attorney for 30 years. He knows everything about the trust, everything about my intentions, and everything about your mother's financial history going back to 2018. Call him. You have the right to protect yourself. Don't wait. I love you more than any number. Grandpa. There was a phone number at the bottom. Printed, not handwritten, which meant he'd typed it somewhere and then carefully cut it and taped it to the letter, which meant he'd thought about the possibility that someone else might see his handwriting and recognize a name. He'd been careful. He'd been planning this since before he died. I called from the swings because the bench felt too exposed. My hands were the kind of cold that comes from inside rather than from the air. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. David Caldwell, attorney at law, picked up on the second ring. I've been expecting your call, Quinn, he said. I want to tell you about David Caldwell because he's the reason any of what followed was possible and because he deserves to be in this story clearly. He was 63 years old, a solo practitioner in Harrisburg who had handled trusts and estates for 31 years. He had been my grandfather's attorney since 1994. They'd met when my grandfather came in to draft his first will after my mother was born, which means David Caldwell had known my mother since before she could remember him. He had watched her over 3 decades, in the way that estate attorneys watch the families of the people they serve, not intrusively, professionally, with the kind of attention that comes from understanding that the people left behind are frequently the source of complexity. When my grandfather first told him about the trust he was establishing for me, David had asked, "Does Carol know about this?" My grandfather had said, "Not the specifics." David had said, "I think that's wise." We met 3 times in the month before my birthday. I told my mother I was doing college financial aid appointments, which was plausible because it was November of my senior year and everyone was doing college financial aid appointments. She didn't ask follow-up questions. She was busy on Wednesdays. David laid out what he'd found in those 3 meetings, and I'm going to give you the specific version because the specific version is what makes it real. My mother had been working with a man named Lance Briggs, Briggs & Associates, family wealth planning, an estate attorney licensed in Pennsylvania with 2 state bar disciplinary reprimands on his record, which David had found in approximately 4 minutes of public record searching. The first reprimand was for misrepresenting the terms of a document to an elderly client. The second was for commingling client funds. He was still licensed, barely. Lance Briggs had been coming to my house on Wednesdays at 4:30 for 4 months. He had produced 4 versions of the same document, all dated February 28th, my 18th birthday, all with my name in the header, all designed to be signed on or after the moment the trust became accessible. The document had 3 main functions. First, it would make my mother a co-trustee of the inherited funds, giving her joint control over distributions. Second, it granted Mark Hollis financial power of attorney over the trust assets in the event of my incapacity or extended absence, a vague enough term to be essentially usable at will. Third, it directed a significant portion of the principal into an entity called Hollis Everett Holdings LLC. I looked up Hollis Everett Holdings LLC in the Pennsylvania Business Registry. 1 member, Mark Hollis, registered 4 months prior, and on page 9 of version 4. 3 of the document. David had obtained all 4 versions through channels I didn't ask about and don't fully understand, but which involved a colleague in Harrisburg and a great deal of David's private conviction that what was happening was wrong. On page 9, tucked into a subsection labeled Educational Support Provisions, tuition assistance for Schuyler Hollis, Bucknell University, $65,000 per year, 4 years, $260,000 of my grandfather's money, for my stepsister's education, not from Mark, not from my mother, from my grandfather's trust, which my grandfather had built over 60 years of bridge designs and clipped coupons, and which was left to me, specifically and only me, because I was the grandchild who called every Sunday and remembered that he liked lemon in his tea, and understood what the maple leaf in the cedar box meant. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. I sat in David Caldwell's office on the 3rd meeting, looking at page 9, and I felt the specific cold clarity that comes when you have been watching something peripheral for a long time, and it suddenly resolves into focus. "What do you want to do?" David asked. I looked at the document. 4 months of work, 4 versions, each one refined. "She'll sign. She always does." "Build mine," I said. David named it the Margaret Trust, after my grandmother, which I told him was exactly right. Corporate trustee, Midland Trust Services, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. 32 years administering irrevocable trusts. Their managing director was a woman named Patricia Osei, who had reviewed the structure and confirmed it was sound, and who communicated exclusively in crisp declarative sentences, which I found enormously reassuring. Irrevocable. That word mattered. An irrevocable trust cannot be modified, amended, or dissolved by the grantor after it's been funded. Once the money was in, it was in, permanently administered by Midland, permanently subject to the trust terms, permanently beyond anyone else's reach. Beneficiary, me, exclusively. Excluded permanently as beneficiaries and trustees. My mother, Mark Hollis, Schuyler Hollis. I read the exclusion clause 3 times. Each time it said exactly what it it needed to say. We scheduled the execution for midnight on my birthday. David arranged for a mobile notary, a woman named Teresa Brock, 12 years as a commissioned notary in Pennsylvania, who did late-night document executions for estate attorneys on a regular basis, and who joined the Zoom call at 11:52 p.m. in what appeared to be her kitchen. Patricia Osei from Midland Trust was on the line from Harrisburg, which is 2 hours earlier, so it was 9:52 for her, which she noted without complaint. At 11:59 p.m., and I was in my bedroom in pajamas, laptop on my desk, room dark except for the screen light. Downstairs, my mother and Mark were asleep. I could hear the specific silence of a house at midnight, the furnace cycling, the refrigerator hum, David's voice from the laptop speakers. Quinn, we're ready when you are. Patricia Osei. Midland is standing by. Teresa Brock, ready to notarize. I looked at the signature field on the screen. My name, waiting. At 12:01 a.m., I typed it. Quinn Ellery Marsh. Each letter on purpose. At 12:03, Patricia said, initiating wire transfer. I held the breath I'd been holding since November. At 12:04, transfer confirmed. $681,412.90. The Margaret Trust is fully funded. Irrevocable. I closed my laptop, sat in the dark. Downstairs, my mother was sleeping. In 7 hours, she was going to slide a folder across a breakfast table and smile, and she wasn't going to know when she did it that she was sliding 12 pages of dead paper at someone who had finished building her answer 4 minutes after midnight. I got into bed. I slept better than I had in 6 months. The pancakes were her touch, and I want to give her credit for the production value. She'd made the kind my grandfather used to make. Blueberry, from scratch, with the edges slightly lacy the way they get when the pan is exactly the right temperature. Birthday candles in them, 3 of them, which meant she'd remembered and decided to use the memory as staging, which is a level of calculation I still find remarkable. The folder was already on the table when I came downstairs. Not hidden, placed. Positioned at an angle that said this is here, but I haven't made it a big deal yet. She let me sit down, let me pour orange juice, let me exist in the birthday atmosphere for about 45 seconds. Then she slid it across and smiled. Honey, we need to talk about that money. I picked up the folder. I read it the way David had told me to read it. Both hands, deliberate pace, index finger under each line. Not performing careful reading, actually doing it. At the 2-minute mark, I could feel her smile beginning to require maintenance. At 4 minutes, she tapped her mug twice, the sound of someone managing impatience. Mark, across the table. Quinn, you don't need to read every line. I like to understand what I'm signing, I said. It's just structure, routine. My guy is on standby to notarize. We can have this done before. I looked up. Mark, he stopped. A minute ago you said, our attorney. Now it's my guy. Silence. The specific silence of a table at which something has shifted. I turned to page 5, the Hollis Everett Holdings LLC paragraph. I put my finger under it. Mom, what is Hollis Everett Holdings LLC? A family entity. She picked up her coffee. For tax efficiency. It's very standard. When was it formed? She didn't answer. I turned to the footer on the last page. Document generated December 14th, 2025. Briggs & Associates, Family Wealth Planning, version 4.3, 4 months, 4 versions. I was looking at the 4th. I closed the folder. I ran into your attorney at the country club, I said. Monday night. Navy blazer, Caesar salad. He had his briefcase, which I thought was odd for a Monday dinner. Skylar, who I hadn't mentioned yet because I had not decided how much to say in front of her, inhaled sharply. Mark leaned forward. Don't get cute. I'm not being cute, I said. I'm reading. I looked at him steadily and noting. My phone lit up on the table, face up where everyone could see it. 9:03 a.m. David Caldwell, Esquire. Mark stood halfway out of his chair. Don't answer that. I think I will. Quinn, I'm sitting down, Mark. I looked at him the way you look at ice on a driveway, carefully, with the specific attention you give things that could cause a fall. Then I hit the green button. Speaker. Phone flat on the table between the maple syrup and the manila folder. Good morning, Quinn. David's voice filled the kitchen. Warm, unhurried. The voice of a man who has been doing this for 31 years and is not in a hurry about any of it. Happy birthday. I hope I'm not interrupting breakfast. You're not, I said. We were just having a conversation about money. Good timing then. I could hear a page turning. I'm calling to confirm that the asset transfer we discussed has completed successfully. Transfer initiated at 12:03 a.m., confirmed at 12:04 a.m. Total funded amount, $681,412.90. The Margaret Trust is fully funded, irrevocable, and administered by Midland Trust Services of Harrisburg. Your mother, Carol Marsh, Mark Hollis, and Skylar Hollis are permanently excluded as beneficiaries and trustees under the terms of the trust instrument. My mother's fork hit her plate. A small, clean clink, the sound of a utensil dropped by hands that have just received news that requires the immediate reallocation of all available processing capacity. Mark's hands were flat on the table. His jaw was working without producing words. David kept going. Same pace, same warmth. One additional matter I wanted you to be aware of. I have filed a formal complaint with the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board regarding Lance Briggs's involvement in preparing the document currently on your table, along with the 3 prior drafts we've identified. The complaint was filed Monday morning, and Mr. Briggs was notified of the filing yesterday at 4 p.m. My mother's voice, barely. You filed on Briggs. On Monday, David said. I expect he's somewhat unavailable today. I looked at the manila folder on the table. Version 4.3, 12 pages. 4 months months of Wednesdays and charcoal Lexuses and a leather binder with a brass closure, a plan that had been revised and refined and improved through 3 prior iterations, getting closer each time to something that might get a quiet daughter to sign her grandfather's legacy away over birthday pancakes. Dead paper. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the folder, then at the phone, then at me, and I watched the moment. I've thought about this a great deal since. I watched the exact moment when she understood which kind of quiet daughter she had raised. Not the manageable kind, not the one who signs, because she always does. The kind who sits in the dark at midnight and types her name slowly, each letter on purpose, into a document that makes everything that comes after irrelevant. The kind who has her grandfather's cedar box and his phone number and 30 years of his attorney's full attention. The kind who learned from a man who clipped coupons and drove an old Honda and designed bridges that are still standing that the most important thing you build is the thing you build before anyone knows you're building it. Mark said something. I don't remember what. It didn't register as meaningful. Skylar was looking at the table. I picked up my phone, ended the call, and said, "Thank you, David." Then I got up, poured myself more orange juice, and sat back down. The folder was still on the table between us. No one touched it. Aftermath is always quieter than people expect. The Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board investigation into Lance Briggs took 8 months. David sent me the interim notice in September. Additional reprimand, mandatory ethics training, 6-month probationary period on his license. Not disbarred. Not yet. But the third strike on a record that already had 2, and in David's professional assessment, the third would be the one that finally cost him the license altogether. He'll do it again, David told me. People like Lance Briggs always do it again. The disciplinary board knows that. They're watching now. Mark and my mother did not get married. I'm not certain why. It wasn't something I had direct information about. What I knew was that by the following spring, his car wasn't in the driveway anymore, and my mother had stopped referring to the wedding in the present tense. Skylar went to Bucknell in the fall. Her father paid for it, presumably, or she got loans, or something else I wasn't part of. My mother and I exist in a specific kind of distance now. Not hostility, not warmth. Something in between that doesn't have a clean name. A recognition on both sides that we understand each other differently than we did, and that the understanding requires some adjustment. She has never mentioned the folder again. I have not mentioned it either.